Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got two generations of the SCCY CPX-2 and I've got the latest from Smith Wesson, the CSX. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. The CSX by Smith & Wesson is really kind of aimed at appealing to the metal frame 1911 type guys, where you don't want to carry a 1911 but you need something smaller that you can conceal more easily. And the SCCYs are really targeting people that like a hammer-fired gun, a DAO, double strike capability, and want something that's reliable and inexpensive. And the SCCYs have proven to be both. They are inexpensive. They're between $309 and $339, depending on whether you get the regular or the optics ready version of them. The SCCYs in general, every one that I've used, has for the most part proven to be pretty reliable, and the triggers are decent on them. We'll get to that when I get into doing the triggers. So this is not intended to be a comparison between the two generations of SCCY, so I'll just be real quick about what's the difference. So this is the prior generation, this is the Gen 3, and the things you'll notice that are different is the prior generation has finger grooves and no rail. The Gen 3 has a 2-slot rail up front there and has gotten rid of the finger grooves. And finger grooves are not finger grooves, that's kind of a personal thing, but right now the rage is getting rid of finger grooves. Look at the black Gen 5s and many of the other things. The big difference, I would say, between these two that would be relevant before I set this guy aside is the prior generation had this thing on the back that was intended to be a cushion to mitigate recoil. It really didn't do much in that realm. These do handle recoil well, but what it did do is it would stamp your hand. It would create suction on these little holes up against your skin, and you'd get a copy of this back strap stamped on your hand that would stay there for a little while. And that wasn't very well liked. I'm going to set this aside and focus on the latest generation of it, which is the Gen 3. They have these steel 10-round magazines. So they do fit into that kind of that high capacity, but they're starting to be at the edge of the micro in micro compact. But they're still, with a weight of 15 ounces and 10 rounds of capacity, they're still competitive in that territory. Now when you start getting into some of the things like the latest P365 that gets up to 15 plus rounds, you know, they start to lose out there. But to get a really good quality gun that is in the $300 and some territory is actually pretty good. They have 3-dot sights, and they are an internal hammer. And one thing on these, they're true DAO, so the hammer is fully not cocked when they're sitting here, which makes a lot of people comfortable because it mitigates the likelihood of a drop fire. The hammer is not under any tension at all, it's just sitting there. So if I cycle it, or whether I do or don't, there's a little bit of take up, but not much. Kind of a long-ish, about a 9-pound pull, but it's very, very smooth. And as you would expect, reset is all the way out, because honestly, cycling it didn't make a difference. There's the trigger pull again, and then there's your double strike. So whether you cycle this thing or not, it doesn't make a difference. But one thing I did find is the trigger is smooth enough, and it's not too long. The shoe is comfortable on your hand. The trigger really doesn't make it difficult to keep this on target. If you're used to something with a modern, really light trigger like a Glock, of course, you may have a little trouble with this. But as these DAOs go, it's actually a very good DAO trigger, which would be surprising in a relatively inexpensive gun. They have a thumb safety or not, it's up to you. I'm sorry, this one here does not have the thumb safety. What I was playing with was the slide stop slide release. But there is a thumb safety version available, and the thumb safety would be back here. And I personally tend not to prefer thumb safety, so I got the version without the thumb safety. But the version with it's actually fairly easy to operate, fairly easy to get to. Now if I move over to the CSX, talk about it a little bit. It comes with a 10-round magazine, and it also comes with a 12-round magazine. So when it comes to the capacity, the CSX is going to win out a little bit. And when you put the 12-round magazine in, it extends the grip just a hair and kind of gives you a full, almost a full 3-finger grip. With the 10-round magazine, you're kind of at a 2 and maybe just a fraction of that third finger. And let me go back to the CSX for a minute. I'm sorry, the Sky for a minute. It's a 2-finger grip without the magazine, but when you put the magazine in, it has a little finger rest, pinky rest, and it gives you a full 3-finger grip, and it's actually quite comfortable and contoured. So put that back down again, pick back up on the CSX. A few disadvantages to the CSX. Number one, it does not have a rail, so you're relegated to trigger guard type components if you want to put a laser on this. And this, I don't know how popular this is going to be, so I'd be very surprised if manufacturers are quick to come up with that. It is a 1911 style design. Being of that 1911 style design, it needs to be carried basically cocked and locked. It's hammers down, so the trigger is useless. If I cycle it, the hammer is back, and it has what appears on the surface to be a 1911 trigger, but it's not quite. It's hinged at the top, and it feels a bit inconsistent. So when you go to pull it, you kind of expect it to go straight back, but you really have to put most of the force to the center line or below. So when you pull this trigger, if you used to a 1911 and you go to put pressure at the kind of at the center point like that, you're going to have a hard time with it. If you tilt your finger and you put more of the pressure at the bottom, it'll break reliably and actually quite light. So when it breaks light, it's got a nice trigger. What I did find is that it tends to be very, very inconsistent at the range as far as exactly how much pressure is it going to take to make this trigger break. And when I first got this gun, there were several cases where it didn't matter how strong I was pulling on it. It wasn't going anywhere. The trigger just was not going to break. And other than the thumb safety, there's nothing else that should interfere with the operation of the trigger. So the design, if you just sit it here on the table and look at it and say, okay, that's going to be a 1911 trigger, so now I know what to expect, it's not exactly what you're going to get. It does have a thumb safety, but like a 1911, it has to be cocked in order to activate the thumb safety. It does go off fairly easy, but it's difficult to put the safety on with your thumb. Just the angles just aren't right, but at least it does sweep off nicely. And the safety is ambidextrous. There's one on each side, as well as the slide stop slide release. Once I got past the initial trigger not wanting to work at all occasionally and got it to the point where it really is just down to pushing it in the right spot, after that point the trigger became reliable. So in subsequent outings with this gun, it's proven to be reliable. It's got a few other features that are nice. It has front and rear serrations, and they're full size front and rear serrations, so they're easy to get a hold of. And like a 1911, once the trigger is back, the slide's actually fairly light. The slide's about the same heaviness as any other slide when the trigger or the hammer is down. And it does have really nice 3-dot easy to see sights. So overall, it's got the potential to be a good gun. It just has kind of missed the mark in a few different places. This has two features that 1911s don't typically. It has these wraparound replaceable back straps. By virtue of that, it also eliminates the 1911 grip safety, so it doesn't have that particular feature. It's got a good design. They really had a good idea. I think a couple of the design elements missed the mark, but overall it's a good idea. So let's talk about dimensions. And let me grab the correct one, grab the latest one. So I'm going to start with length, and then I'll put some mags in them. If I line them up, put the mags out of the way, if I line them up beaver tail to beaver tail, they're really close. The Sky is 6 inches even, and the Smith & Wesson is 6.1 inches. So the difference is not going to make a difference in overall and whether or not you can conceal it, that 0.1 inch difference. From a height perspective, I'm going to put the flush mag, so it's 10 rounds. If I put the correct mag in the correct gun, it would probably work a lot better now, won't it? Because of the pinky extender, the Sky does lose a little bit when it comes to the height contest. The Sky is 5.26 and the Smith & Wesson is 4.5. So the Smith & Wesson kind of takes over when you're equal capacity in being a shorter grip. That can matter because the grip is the hard part to hide when you're trying to conceal something. It's the part that will stick out. So the real advantage there goes to the CSX. And I'm actually going to take it a step further, and I'm going to put the 12-round magazine in. And even with the 12-round magazine, the CSX is shorter than the Sky. So Now you've got a capacity and a height advantage. So the CSX really kind of wins there. From a width perspective, the CSX is a little bit thinner. It comes in at 1.01 and the Sky's at 1.1. That is a difference, but I don't know if it's a significant enough difference to, force you to choose one or the other. Weight is a difference, but I want to kind of be careful to not ding the CSX for being heavier because it intends to be. It's a metal frame gun, so it's definitely going to be heavier. It comes in at 19.5 ounces, and the Sky comes in at 15 ounces with the flush magazine. But again, this is specifically meant to be a metal frame gun, so you would expect it to be heavier. If the way you're going to carry it, weight is going to matter, such as on the ankle or in a pocket, the Sky's going to have an advantage. If your intent is to carry it inside the waistband, both of them are lighter than most anything out there. For example, the CSX compared to something like a Glock 26, it's got a couple ounce advantage on a Glock 26 and the same capacity, or actually more capacity when you put this 12-round magazine in. Really, that doesn't add much. I would almost, if I were going to carry the CSX, have the 12-round magazine in all the time, because it really doesn't add much to the height. So there's a lot of areas where these two kind of overlap each other. Biggest difference being 1911 style metal frame and DAO polymer. But in where you would actually use a gun like this, there's a lot of similarities. The couple other things that may come into play is takedown procedure. And I'm not going to actually take them down, but I will demonstrate what you would do. On the Sky, you pull it back to this point and then you pull this out. You do need a tool until the gun's been done a few times, and then after that you can actually do it with your finger. Now that I've done that, it's kind of moved the barrel fell, so I may have a hard time putting this back together to get it back to operation with one hand. Actually, it went back together. If I pulled that out, the gun would have come right apart, and then when I go to put it back together again, you push it back in, make sure you line up the barrel, and it goes. These are actually fairly easy to maintain. Worst case, if you needed a tool, your channel cleaning tool or pick or whatever it was you're going to use to clean it, you can work for that. The CSX, on the other hand, a little bit different. You actually need a punch and a hammer, and you punch this little pin out that is actually attached to this, and it's got a kind of like a serrated, like a gear on it that interfaces with this, and it's a friction fit. I really do see a couple problems with that. Over time, it's probably going to loosen up and you're going to have a tendency for this to fall out. This hasn't, but it just has that potential. But the other thing is, when you're going to put it back together, if you get it wrong and you line those teeth up wrong, you may actually damage the teeth. To me, I don't like that design. It's too easy to screw it up, and it absolutely requires a tool, and there's no way you're doing that with your fingernail. The Sky, when they're brand new and they first come out, you may have a hard time picking it with your fingernail, and in fact, I didn't think I was going to be able to, but notice it came right out in my hand. So from a maintenance perspective, the Sky is going to be easier to maintain, and I think you're going to be less likely to damage it taking it apart or permanently damage it while putting it back together. So that's kind of a big advantage to the Sky. The fact that you can get an optics ready version of the Sky for about $30 more, almost to the point where I wouldn't get the regular one, get the optics ready. At the time I got this one, the optics ready wasn't an option. I got it when they first brought out this generation. Then, as far as shooting them, the triggers are different. If you're truly used to a 1911, you may actually have trouble with this till you adapt to it. But from a trigger perspective, I found that once I adapted to the fact that it was a longer trigger, because it was light and very consistent, it didn't take me very long to adapt to it and be able to pull decent groups with it. This trigger never actually got to the consistency point. I never got it to the point where it worked the same every time I pulled it. So as I was going to pull it, I would often end up pulling the gun off axis because it wasn't breaking where I thought it should, because I hadn't tilted my finger the correct way. Overall, between the two, unless you're just bent that it has to be a metal frame 1911 style, and that's the only option, I honestly would go with the Sky. Half the price, basically more features, and overall more reliable and easier to shoot well. To me, the Sky would be the winner, but it kind of comes up to what it is that you personally like. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Getter, Rumble, pretty much everywhere. And thank you.
it's just